What happens when you purify your body, your mind, your spirit? Something miraculous. The body begins to heal itself. Welcome to the Medicine Girl podcast, where each week we explore new ways to heal your body from the root, igniting your inner healer. You are the medicine. And now, here's your host, Robin Stebbins.
Hello and welcome to the Medicine Girl podcast. It's me, your host, Robin Stebbins, and today I am here with my friend Keenan Whyte, and we are going to talk about spiritual awakening and bypass. But first, Keenan, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, letting our listeners know a little bit about you, and I always like to say something maybe that you consider important on your journey.
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Keenan. I am an integrative life coach and an astrologer. And yeah, I basically help people live a more radiant life, create with more purpose, intimacy, and prosperity. Right now, I'm working on basically integrating some of these divine architecture arts and sciences like evolutionary astrology, sidereal astrology, and the gene keys, and human design. And so I'm bringing all of that into my coaching work. And then I'm helping people create more intimacy in their lives through greater body awareness. My background as a body worker and energy worker allows me to take a little bit more of a somatic lens and take on the individual. In terms of something that is, something that is new in my world or important on my journey. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say to that. I guess the biggest thing for me that I've been finding in my life is like play, just when it comes down to, being on the spiritual path. And, we're going to talk about bypass today and all that. And I think one of the biggest bypasses we can have around spirituality is just seeing in any form or in any which way in which spirituality is somehow out there, or it's separate, or there's something we need to do to be spiritual. So you get this kind of like, I think sometimes a syndrome where it's like, well, if I'm not chanting and meditating and doing all these things, I'm not spiritual. But I mean, truly, the person who owns the company and that's running a big business and is employing hundreds of people and, supporting their families come home to a dinner at night is not less spiritual than a person in their room chanting and doing mantras. So I really like to just kind of make that connection of like, there is no separation. Everything is spiritual. And one of the things that I've been just enjoying is skateboarding, like just getting out in the sun and like really seeing that, there's a kid inside all of us, and that, how we want to express our spirituality is really up to us. To me, there's such a important component about living authentically and opening your heart up to really what lights you up. I mean, that thing that lights you up is going to be the thing that draws in all the people and the resources and really puts out like an impulse or an energy out to your soul tribe that is going to bring them in. So for you to really get, in tune with what is it that just like lights me up like a Christmas tree. I mean, that's kind of been the thing that's been supporting my journey the most lately. Is just how do I just do as many of the things and be in many of the states that support me living into that, and then just watch the rest of life kind of take care of itself. So
That's what we can all hope for is to, I think, turn that light inward and see what these concepts, they're just concepts that we're all kind of playing with. They're not rules, and I'm trying to get away from any kind of dogma. It's, what does that spirituality mean to you? What does meditation mean to you? And then we look at with our eyes, is it working? Do I feel peaceful, contented, whatever that feeling state that you were looking for, is that being created with these set of ideas that you're playing with? So I really like that idea of play though too, Keenan, because I think especially in these last couple of years, I have felt so grindy and put my head down and like working and trying to get through this and navigate through what's happening, it's really pushed me into finding joy and play in each moment. So I really want to talk about that in terms of there's so much language in the, what could we call it, the spiritual community. And in that language, I think a lot of the ideas get boxed in, and they get boxed into an idea of, well, this is what awakening means. So to you, what does spiritually awakening entail? What does that concept mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's an important one. It feels like in today's world, right?
Yeah.
I've been a seeker a lot of my life, and on my journey, I feel like I reached my kind of like pinnacle moment of sort of doing my spiritual seeking in terms of this transcendent world and flying high. I guess Robert Bly does a really good job capturing this in Iron John. It's a really great book about men's initiatory rights into manhood, and really embracing and embody the healthy structures of masculinity, and doing it through sort of like the world of the snake and the earth. And what can tend to happen is that we just want to fly with the birds, and we just want to go and let's just be up above and everything, and just kind of be over here in la la land, and not really come into our bodies and experience what's actually happening here and feel the full spectrum of what life is offering us, which includes sadness. It includes struggle. It includes pain. And I mean, we can kind of dive in a little bit more. Like, I can see this conversation going into the importance of pain, because I see pain as a feedback mechanism from the body, as a way of communicating to you, through your higher self or your soul, like, hey, this is what I'm trying to awaken you up to. And so pain is really a beautiful medium in which we can actually awaken, because it's not that I'm going to go out and seek pain, or I'm going to go and like, well, where's my pain today? But I might just tune into my body and be like, what's present with me? And so maybe it's just like this full cup of joy, and I'm just like teeming over, and I'm like, oh my God, I feel amazing. And I'm just like feeling so good. That could be my experience. Or it could just be like, no, I feel really groggy, whatever it is. To me, like the awakening process is a series of softenings and into presence. And I guess I brought up my journey about flying high and my sort of moment in India, because I was studying yoga and practicing, and I was probably about 2 years into my journey. And so when I was riding out and flying out to India, I was reading this book about how you should not go to India to seek your spiritual awakening. And it was like this beautiful paradox irony of like being on this plane and being like, I'm going to do it anyways, and then be this rebel and read this book about not doing it and get the experience anyways. And there was this moment, like maybe 4 months into my journey, where I just felt like I had sort of reached the upper limits of the old perennial yogic philosophy of transcendence, which I see as sort of like more of a baseline experience to what spirituality is today in this ever evolving world, where we actually work into maybe a state where we can actually see that, oh, I'm not just this body, I'm not me, I'm not just Keenan. Wait a minute, Keenan's just a word or like a name that describes this vessel, me, my personality, what I call me, my ego, and this structure, this identity that I need to present in my personality to the world. And the transcendence is kind of getting to a point, I think, where you're beyond that. You're kind of like, okay, well, I'm actually not just that, I am something else. And if I listen and I watch my thoughts and I kind of like between lines and kind of look in the background, I noticed that there's this witness. there's this capacity of awareness that's just sort of there. And wait a minute, what if I'm not my thoughts? What if I'm not the things I'm thinking, the things I'm viewing, whatever it is that I may be identifying? And there's this kind of union, I think, that happens with like the seer and the seeing. And I think that it's kind of like awakening to me is kind of like getting to be able to create a little more intimacy with that experience where you can step a little bit beyond me as the ego. But there's this also bypass where we can just be like in that space all the time and then just be like, okay, well, I'm not Keenan anymore. I'm just some bird in the sky and I don't identify with any of that. And then there's not really a bridge into the true, to me, like the idea of embodiment or embodiment coaching, which is a large part of what the style of coaching I like to do with people, is supporting people make this connection, this union between body and spirit. Because being in the spirit and being in the transcendent space is flying with the birds, and then coming down into the body is being in the snake and kind of being in this survival and being like, whoa, I have desires and I have passions and I do have a nervous system, and I actually, sometimes I go into flight, sometimes I go into fight, and there's this kind of like pulse within me. I have genitals, I have senses, I have, there's all this earthly world. And if we just, there's a few different paths to spirituality. I think you can kind of go through, there's the ascetic path, which is kind of like getting into this, I'm not going to be in the world at all. I'm just going to kind of, I'm going to give up my pleasures and bodily everything in order just to pursue spirit. But what I'm interested in is actually more of a tantric path where you're unifying and you're working with desires, and you're seeing desires in the body as a vehicle or a means to recognize spirit or to unify. And so this divine union has been a thing that I've been focused on lately, is just really embracing this divine masculine feminine within myself. And I think that's a large part of this awakening process, where we get to understand that this divine father spirit principle that is pure awareness can unify with this, which is sort of like our Shiva, can unify with this Shakti world of form and matter and energy and the body experience. So maybe that's a good start.
That's a great start. What really strikes me in all of that is just, it's this unification of all that is. And so I do see that a lot in those that are new to awakening. It's the love and light. And what you were describing is flying with the birds. And again, when we look at all of the archetypes and the stories, when you have nothing but positive, what we would say positive, flying in the ethers and feeling joy, it ceases to be joy at a certain point because we have no contrast. I don't believe that we are here embodying this, our self, our ego, our experience, my name, all of those things that accompany that, just to be up flying with the birds. I feel that, I think we can sort of feel into our ancestral memories. And there's the encompassment of all of that. I've had some memories of past lives. I've had some memories of different experiences, and that's great. But I think it's easy to get stuck there. Mm-hmm. I think it's like our memories in this lifetime, they are in a linear fashion sometimes, so that we can understand a deeper level of ourself, maybe understand a deeper knowing of God, our God self, and encompassing all those things. Like, you don't kill your ego. That's a valuable piece of yourself if you have the awareness around it. So, I wanted to talk about, just go back to when you said you went to India and you're reading that book, kind of like ironically, like I'm going to India to awaken. What was your experience with that?
With
going
some
to
of the
India?
things I was learning in the book, or just the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you said so far. So yeah, I mean, going to India, it's interesting. I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I do feel like, yeah, when I was there, I was wanting to deepen into a practice. And I suppose, I mean, that book really was helpful because it was like, here's a way to look at a lot of the spiritual bypasses that happen, including this idea of needing to go to India. So it kind of put my whole like pursuit, even though I actually had this opportunity because I was teaching English in Thailand and I met somebody who was going to India really close by to go to see this teacher. And it was my original seed of intention going out to Southeast Asia and that area of the world was to just deepen my practice with yoga and potentially find a teacher. Um, and so I actually turned him down. He was like, you could come out and study with my teacher. It's really cheap. And I was like, that sounds great, but I think I'm going to teach another semester here. And then I kind of went home that night and I was like, wait a minute, like the whole idea of like why I came out here was to do that. And so can I let go of this idea of teaching to go out there? And so there's like, I mean, the energy that I was in was like, there's a little bit of this like risk. Like, well, I was in this really great position. I mean, I even looked at other positions in other schools and they're like, why would you ever leave that school that you're at? And I'm like, well, because it's like, the whole, to me, it was like, it was the experience of getting all the big money in a private school. And I wanted to actually meet like some of the people who are in the rural lands and like get to know their way of life and actually learn the language and not only just yeah, have the experience that I was having. So, but I think like the quality of my experience by the time I was in India was just full trust. Because I was like, well, am I gonna trust that the impulse in my heart and that somewhere something is guiding me to potentially do this? And I don't know whether I want to call that spirit, I want to call that God, or I want to call that my higher self or some other aspect or whatever, but something is telling me that this is a yes and that I need to go. And I think that I guess that supported me navigating my life a little bit more fluidly, but also with discernment, which I think is that balance where you want a little bit of flow and you want to be adaptable and changeable, but you also need discernment. And those are to me feminine masculine qualities where, okay, yeah, I'll be open and I'm open to what may come through me, but then how is it coming through me? Is it coming through my mind? Like, do I just think that I need to do this? Am I intellectualizing how great it would be to have this experience and be out in India and like studying and what credentials I would get? I'm going to get this teacher training. I mean, I left and I probably did, I don't know how many hours I did there, but it was 4 months and I was pretty much probably about 8 hours of maybe like, well, probably not 8 hours of formal, but maybe 5 hours of formal and then study. And I mean, to me, I was wanting to be like, my spiritual path is everything. So whether I meet somebody on the street or whether I read this book or I'm doing asanas or I'm doing pranayama, it's all the same. But I think like to kind of really answer your question, trust is the biggest one. And I think I guess I was learning, this deeper trust of a higher intelligence that was moving through me and maybe noticing the beginning of what is it like to choose some form of meditation, whatever that is, that allows you to purify some of these imprints and patterns that are there in our subconscious that tell us how we need to be or how we should be, and then awaken to more of this experience of anything is possible. Because to me, like that's what human potential is that it's more of a place of neutrality where we're not necessarily pulled one way or we're perceiving in any direction, but we feel like, hey, infinite possibilities are possible right now. Whoa. And just to kind of be present with that kind of just brings you into, I could choose anything, right? So at that point, what am I going to choose? Am I going to choose from my heart or my head? And I think that's what discernment is about. Is it is about distinguishing that. And actually this leads me to maybe what I was initially thinking when you first asked that question, which was that in the yogic traditions, this was a seed that one of my peers, he's the guy who, he's an English guy who brought me to India. So I met him in Thailand, and he was just kind of sharing different things. And I was like, well, tell me like, what are the chakras, tell me about that, and I had my own take on all that. And he'd be like, well, my recommendation is to sit naked in front of a mirror and just imagine and visualize those chakras in your body, and just keep showing up to that for maybe 30 minutes a day. And I don't think you're going to want my answer anyway. So he'd always give me kind of like those ideas. And I love the one seed that he gave me, which was, it's not like we tend to have this desire or seeking to kind of bring up to the higher levels of consciousness, right? So we're at a higher frequency and we're going to be in the higher, levels or whatever it is. But what's interesting, and I find that the more that I look into other spiritual traditions, I see that a common theme is that it comes back to the heart. And the seed that he planted with me was like, don't think about it as much like your third eye. And like, yes, you're going to want to open in some intuitive awareness, but there's a reason why Guruji, he's referring to our teacher, he focuses on the heart. And that was just kind of interesting. Like at that point, I was kind of like, okay. And I was open. It wasn't like, I wasn't like kind of against that idea, but I was like, that's interesting to think that. And I'm thankful that he gave me that, because through my journey, I do feel that even though I developed maybe some of the maybe a deeper awareness within myself, I would always think about the heart and how those things connect. And over time, I've come to see that this heart is kind of like a portal. It's sort of like where it all unifies. And, if we're up in the air, we're down in the earth. I mean, the way home is in the heart, and that's where humanity is. And I mean, even in Qigong, you have the practice of bringing the heaven and the earth together and then radiating that out. And that radiating out it's the connection to the heart math of all it is. And so, yeah, I guess I don't know where we are where you want to direct this conversation, but.
Well, I really resonate a lot with what you're talking about. And what I keep hearing a lot with those that are awakening, and what I have observed from my first medicine journey until recently, it's that we tend to get stuck in these patterns and these labels. Labels from our handlers, meaning you have PTSD, you have bipolar, you are diabetic. The masculine and feminine concepts hold that level of labeling too, because I feel that
Yes,
we can, again, like get stuck in these concepts and these ideas. So it's like, oh, that's my masculine coming out, or this is my feminine. And I think what we're trying to like dig through, and we have a little bit more challenge, those of us that have been so programmed, experienced trauma. It's like, what is my true voice? So that's my next question, is this idea of discernment. And when we're concept of discernment, this concept of the heart. When I speak from my heart, I have vocal cords that are innervated from my heart neurons. There's a different concept to my voice. When I hear spirit or God or universe, this wisdom come through me, is different than when I'm thinking about it and I'm trying to like figure it out, and it just never gets to any point. And then I'll go and do something playful, and all of a sudden that comes through, that idea. It's like, oh, it feels fun. It feels playful. It feels from something else that I'm not grinding my way through. So how do you find your true voice? What is your process of that discernment?
Yeah, thanks for bringing this up. I feel like it's really beautiful. I mean, yeah, it just kind of goes to the same idea. I mean, I think you can tell the difference when you you speak and there's a kind of vacancy, and there's been times even in this like last bit of my journey, I'm like, where's my voice? And I think I've just had this really continual journey down into my heart. I mean, like perhaps like we all do. And I think there's a reason why there's that quote out there that's, the longest journey that we'll ever take is 18 inches. And that's from our head to our heart. And to me, that the discernment, it really is that, right? And so if you think about it, just if we literally look at each other's faces and bodies, we can see, well, the voice box is right in between the head and the heart. And there's, it's sort of like a bridge. So to me, the vacancy and the times where my throat has, not necessarily felt open, or my voice sounds a little bit raspy, and there's still kind of like elements I can kind of notice, even the way it's being worked out through conversations, even from the beginning of the conversation. I was a little bit in my head and I was like thinking about how I might want to present myself. But as soon as I drop into like, whatever, it doesn't matter, like just be here now. Okay. Like, because here in the head is the known and in the heart is the unknown. It's kind of like, I don't know anything here, right? There's a different quality of knowing. To me, it's the knowing of not knowing. And there's a wisdom there, and we tend to be in the knowing, but that knowing that we're thinking is the knowing is the intellectual, thought-based, perceiving and containerizing, compartmentalizing, categorizing. And we can be like, oh, that's masculine, that's feminine, that's spirituality, that's this, that's that. It's like, whatever. I mean, if you tune out everything, like this is one really beautiful image Alan Watts painted was, and you just look at a tree and you're just hearing it. And if the tree was just like talking to you, just like, and it would just kind of be this blurring. And you could think about it the same thing with a person. Like whatever you're saying, like, does it really matter the content? I mean, yeah, we've of course decided it does. I mean, we're having a podcast where we're speaking about all these things. And there's this beautiful paradox in life. We can't go and say like necessarily one thing is true and then expect that the opposite is just automatically falsified. And I think that's the process of embodiment, or because to me embodiment is the resolution of duality. It's kind of like being like, okay, well, what I'm perceiving or what I'm thinking and over here, as soon as I take this direction over here, I've created a vacuum space for some other world to then have to be filled. So in that quantum field in which I go over here and I perceive that this is good, this is positive, it's great, it's amazing, you're only perceiving one side of it. So it also has its downside. It also has its negative. And there's a reason why there's been positive psychologists who have actually been suicidal. And that doesn't necessarily get talked about, but I think the reason may be clear at this point, like why that would be.
Well, that's, I think, the bypass is getting stuck in that forward movement of the desire that's cut off from the totality of who we are. Mm-hmm. So the desire then can come from programming and the label of good. I see that right now playing out very prominently in our culture is this virtue. It's like this new credit card, this new currency is like how virtuous I am. And how I call that attention and how I then spirit my motivation through that. And that's not authentic. It's not authentically me. And so what I think for me is to like step back and just, well, like what you're saying, and I can do that with people. I hear their voice and it's like being in the forest and hearing bird calls. I don't assign a voice resonance to it or understanding. I just hear the sounds. And it allows a space with that person to open up. So it's not like I'm hearing what they say and then I'm going to respond to it and try and like either elevate them or teach them a lesson or be a guru or be a student. I'm just there present. And I think that's what maybe it gets sticky because it's like, where is the presence? Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, in my experience being a heterosexual male, I think like seeing the women in my life, like women to me, this is how I'm perceiving, right? I mean, this is my perspective, but, and this is, I think, true in terms of the inner woman, or like the feminine we're using as a word to describe this quality in us that wants to melt. Like we just want to be in this chaos. Like, oh my God, just let me be, do whatever I want, like be crazy, like whatever, like have all these emotions and fly and, run in the breeze and do whatever I want, whatever it is. And it's hard to do that, I guess, when, well, like, I mean, to me, it seems like what a woman may like want is like a container, like a pillar, not necessarily a container, but a pillar of the masculine quality of presence that enables that to happen. And I think that's part of the marriage and the dance, and maybe this other picture of why I think men and women might be a little bit mixed up in terms of how they're identifying gender wise as well, is because maybe it's because we're not completely intimately connected to the quality of this feminine or this woman and this masculine or this man inside of myself. And like this woman, there's a part of me that wants to just be able to be emotional and feel whatever and do. And if I'm gonna do that, if I'm gonna have that experience, it's almost necessary for the other part of me. It's almost a prerequisite to have this part of me that's present. That's like, that's okay. You're safe to explore that. That's fine. And then also to hold that presence, that there's almost like a requirement of like, I want, like, what am I holding the presence for? Right. I mean, and I want to be present to something interesting. Right. So then I mean, there's that kind of dance we have between the two of those things. But I guess, concerning what you had said, I think it's like I could sit here and think about whatever it is I want to do, but if I do, then I'm missing out being present with what is happening in each of the moments. And I may think I want to say something, but then you keep talking and I'm like, holy shit, I love what you're saying now. And like, which part of it, like, it's like food, like which juicy part do I want to like chew on? And like, if I just think about what I want to say, then I miss out on all the delight,
That's it. And it's in that, I guess, that realm. So I love what you said, that there is just not one side to the coin. We have to embrace the totality of each experience. With the joy comes deep sorrow. With this masculine energy comes feminine energy, however we want to label that. And then I was playing around with just not labeling myself whatsoever. Like, I am a woman. But just removing all of that. And then I see what's happening the other end of that. We've got men competing in women's sports because they're now, I guess they're still labeling themselves, but they get to choose their own adventure. And it's that other side of this spiritual coin that can have side effects that, to me, don't create sovereignty, don't create an opening for us to explore and play in these fields. Like, you're a heterosexual man, and your relationships with women,
whatever,
right? You can play with those concepts because you're desiring it to be interesting. And we're desiring these ideas, these concepts, but it can also kind of go awry as well.
I mean, it depends, I think, because like for me, it may be useful to describe myself as a heterosexual man, given that I'm attracted to women primarily. I would prefer that experience in my life. So if I don't distinguish that somehow, like that might not be very helpful.
Well, let me ask you this, Keenan, like whether you distinguish that or not, you probably that's where you would gravitate towards women and having intimacy with women. I mean, that's a
sexually,
question.
but I mean, with men, I'm also gravitated to have intimacy with men as well, and to have brothers and friendships and bonds. Um, I guess like what I want to get at is like, I mean, I think like what bothers me the most about this whole thing is like I can't say anything. So I'm just frozen now, and I can't just like say whatever I want to say now. I've got to be fearful about tiptoeing around making people feel good about something. It's like whatever, like let me talk about it how I want to talk about it. But what I would say is like, where am I coming from that place? Like, am I just like defining myself in the ground as a heterosexual male? And that may mean that now, because I've said that, that puts you somewhere else, or that because I'm defining myself as that, then I have this container view of my own reality that may be limiting. So I think it's okay to use whatever language we want to use. Like I really want to free up the space to be like, let's have freedom, more freedom, please. I mean, isn't this whole idea of like censorship just like a cage? It's incredibly frustrating to me to feel that so many people don't want to say anything at all because they're afraid to say something and then to be ridiculed about it. So I think that's like number one. But
Yeah.
then two, like, well, go ahead.
Well, I just want to put an exclamation point on that, because that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about a freedom of space for me to explore my concepts. And sometimes, when I have that freedom, like I might change my perception. I might change the language around it. But again, I want to be able to speak what I see. And I see that as putting us now back into our boxes. And, we all live in a cage. A few of us realize it's unlocked. So we have that freedom. Like if you're looking for someone to grant you that freedom, you're not free. You can't get freedom from someone. It's created from within, but we are in a culture right now that has squeezed that sense of freedom with all these concepts of this will happen if you do this, and this will happen if you say that, and you can't say this and you'll offend this person. And at the end, what are we saying? That now we've become, in my opinion, we've become robots. We've just concentrated ourselves down to what we're supposed to say.
Yeah, I mean, which is I think the whole problem with this idea. I mean, I think if I'm not mistaken, I mean, that's what cancer culture is all about, is like canceling out some way of being or something that you may want to say, or maybe it's just an observation, whatever it is, and be like, nope, that's, if you do that, then it means this. And I mean, to me, it's just, it comes back very simply to me, like if we want to boil down spirituality, like we could just use the word love.
Mm.
And I mean, is that energy and its purity conditional? Well, only to the mind. And is that really, is the mind really love? I mean, it's up here. It's not really in the heart, right? So, I mean,
That's beautiful.
coming back to it all, it's just, to me, if there's conditions present, to me, that's kind of, even in a relationship, you're not going to have as much of an expansive and joyful, intimate, fun relationship if you're like, well, I love you, but just during these times, or, it's nice when you do that, but, not when you do this. I mean, what I want in a relationship is for someone, and then what I would like to offer is to be able to embrace all aspects, and for that, like, that sacred container to be in place where I can show up in all of me. And that to me is freedom too. I mean, yes, like I totally throw an exclamation mark on your sentence about freedom is created internally, and it definitely is. And then that's also, it's inside out, and then we want to bring that into relationship. And so, I mean, it's interesting how these rules change. I mean, at first when you're getting over trauma, and you're learning to have this proper discernment, and there's this process of embodying more of the heart, and then you may have boundaries, but then as you deepen into a partnership, you don't really want boundaries. You want to be able to just be able to do whatever. And I mean, isn't that totally free? Totally free. And that's the kind of exploration that I would want to have. So I think we want to, I think, be mindful about how there may be some useful set of terms or rules that we may live by, but then that could be totally different in another context.
That there's like 50,000 things I want to mention about that, but the first thing is that when you're experiencing awakening and you're experiencing these concepts, I always tell people, go, even if it, just put your hand on your heart. Just put your hand on your heart and feel into the essence of who you are. How does that resonate within your soul, within your spirit? That's when we're getting back to freedom. That's when we're getting to sovereignty. And my dream, if I had a dream for this planet, would be that everyone would be awakened to themselves, to their heart, to all of these concepts of this multifaceted being that I am, not judging anyone, but awareness around it. So as I'm navigating, then I'm more heart-centered. The brain is great getting me from point A to point B, getting discounts on my airline flight. Like, that's what my brain is. I use my brain for. My heart, I use it for directing, almost, if I had a sailboat, directing it to this desire that's coming from within me, not a headspace. And then the head, so I start to see all these different pieces of myself working in harmony, like teammates, and every now and again, we're going to have issues with our team, and somebody's going to get hurt feelings and anger cropping up. But it's that, like, when you're talking about being in a relationship with someone, it's like, I want that freedom just to express who I am in this moment, messy and beautiful and sloppy and ugly. Like, here I am, this energy, and I want to play now. So I want to really, like, the last part of our conversation, I want to talk about, like, getting that so that it's not so serious, and we can just play with one another. We can play with ideas. We can play with words and concepts. Like, I think we've gotten so far away from that. So can you kind of speak to what that means in your experience? Like, what is play to Keenan?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's perfect question, because it ties everything together in a way. Like, to me, the play is the polarity.
Mm.
That's what's so fun. I mean, maybe we could have, like, just a little fun imagining up what it would be like to have no polarity and no distinctions. And we don't have language, and there's no black and white. It's just, everything is kind of just merging all into together, and we have this unity, and we're all enlightened. I mean, what now? I mean,
Yeah.
the fun is that, like, we get to be all of it. So being in the polarity, being in the messiness, is actually, like, what's been fun with me to play with is this idea of existential kink, because it's like, in my existence, if there's polarity everywhere, and I could go into sadness, and I could go into happiness, and I could go into this experience of success, and maybe everything aligns, and I have the right money coming in, and I have the partner, and I have all this stuff. Or maybe I'm in debt and I can't figure my shit out, and I just feel like I can't get out of this situation. Either way, you have the quality of the experience that you can offer to anything, which can be, and this is where I think sovereignty comes in, is where we have choice. It's like, maybe we can't control everything, but we can more or less govern how we feel. And I really reflected on, what is this idea of sovereignty? Well, to me, it's like, it's very simply the governance of how I feel. And so if in my situation where I have success, or I have this partnership, or I have this debt, or if I'm over here in depression land, I can literally find this pleasure either way. I can find this joy And it's different than happiness. Like to me, joy is a little bit of a different quality. It doesn't carry as much polarity. It has a little bit of more of a neutrality. And it comes, when I describe joy, I'm describing the quality that comes from contentment. It's the contentment that's arising from the baseline experience of being alive. And the idea of, in Ayurvedic terms, you have rajasic and tamasic, which is the spicy and the heated, and then the more like cooling, and then there's sattvic in the middle. And satisfaction to me is like it arises out of contentment, and satisfaction gives forth joy. It gives joy, it gives forth to bliss. And I think this kind of like this line into a more joyful, blissful, ecstatic, creative experience where we're sovereign and we have choice, where we can be in any situation and then just like imbibe in it and be like, I fucking love my depression, like I'm broke as shit, like whatever it is, I mean, or like maybe you have success and you celebrate there too. But I think sometimes we end up getting success and we have maybe these idealistic pictures of like what we want in our life, and then we don't even celebrate. Like there's times where I catch myself doing that too. I'm like, I got the thing that I wanted in my mind and now I'm there and I'm like not celebrating. Like, but then even at that moment, I can be like, how cool is that? Like, and just enjoy like whatever's expressing.
That's what I see. Because I think what we're seeking or desiring from that heart space is what's truly satisfying to the soul. So you see people that accomplish all these things or have all this money, and it's like they thought in that brain space that was what was going to bring them joy and peace and happiness and all of these things, whatever it is. They're not after the stacks of paper. They're after the feeling state they think they're going to get with the money. So but then if we're navigating this satisfying ideas to what our soul expresses, I think it's like in this moment where we're playing, I listening to you, I see you, I'm not judging you, I'm not expecting something from you. It's just a dance. And in that dance, I feel satisfied because I see a different understanding of who I am in this, I say, this collection of God. I feel like we're these unique individual signatures of God, each expressing ourselves in different ways. So I catch myself, Keenan, I'm not perfect, but for the most part, I want people to express themselves how they desire. My feeling though is we have to know who we are, have an awareness more of who we are to express that interaction with one another. And so that's sort of, how do we as humans, with all of this complication that we somehow are bringing into the equation, and it's how it's playing out right now on our planet, and trying to censor us, and good is bad and bad is good, and we're supposed to swallow all of this. The question then is what is a space that we can create with anyone to have a type of conversation like this?
Well, you're doing it wonderfully. I'm also curious, before I would go into that, when you say, because I really agree, I couldn't agree more wholeheartedly around this need I think we have to really understand who we are. And when you say that, what do you mean? Do you mean like what aspect of self do you refer to?
When I'm speaking to you or when I'm expressing from myself?
Just the part when you were talking about, I think we really need to know ourselves in order to be able to do this.
I think it's an understanding of the trauma, the programming, the voices of your parents, the voices of your teachers. That's not who you are. And to be able to create enough space and awareness around that to realize that is programming from the time I was little, that I am what? You can't be too rich or too thin. That's what I heard from the time I was born from my mom, and not to pick up the hero or the victim medallion, because I did for a long time with the trauma I experienced. It's like, oh, I'm this poor little victim. And look at me. I would always kind of lead with my trauma, because it's like, well, you can't judge me because see what I went through. I'd wear it like, kind of like a medallion, a hero badge. Don't judge me because, well, look what I've overcome.
Which has its own bypass into all the glory and beauty of who you are, right?
Yes. And that was my entry point. That medallion, like Frodo going up Mount Doom, it got heavier and heavier and heavier to the point where it became uncomfortable enough for me to be able to look inward and see that and have that awareness around it to release it. So I love having conversations with people that were both in that space of, I am seeing you with curiosity.
Me too. Yeah, it's probably one of my greatest joys in life. Yeah, I mean, I think, to more directly answer your question, I think it's just doing more of this, just being able to create these spaces. And I think it does beg a further question, though, like, what do those spaces look like in today's world? And like, do they always have to be on the podcast? Because like I'm that's how I was doing it, and it's so fun. Well, cool, let's record something. There's kind of something interesting about hitting the record button, and then certain things come out that they don't come out when you're not recording. And they're like, it's not to knock podcasting at all, because I love it. I just feel like we need so much more in person. And what institutions or like buildings, if you just drive around town in the United States and you look around, it's like, what is available for me to go to that I could go and do that? I mean, to me, like, I driving around, like, there's fast food, there's gas stations, and there's like these corporate offices. And I mean, what I envision and what I would love to see is more of this cultural renaissance in which there's more of this intersection of art and music and the crafts, and people being able to really realize that, man, when I work my blood, sweat, and tears for cash, for money, then where am I voting that dollar? Can I pass that off to somebody who's doing something that I love and want to see more of? I mean, that's the difference in our livelihoods. And I think the more that we embrace that and we actually turn a little bit away from some of the bigger corporate stuff, then we can start maybe having more resources available to us to create some of these spaces where it's like, yeah, we have a DJ night, or we have this going on, we have dancing, and I see that happening, and it's amazing. I mean, down here in Sarasota, there's that thing kind of bustling up, and down here in Florida, and there's ecstatic dance groups, and it's changing. It's definitely not it's an interesting crowd. It's happening to a degree, and I think it is everywhere, but that's what I want. I mean, I want a place where we can not feel like we have to go to the bar. Like, maybe there's more tea houses, or there's something available.
I think that's the renaissance that I see happening. It's like when they told us we couldn't leave our house. I'm trying to form a new language around this so it's not so negative. I think what it did was it created a light within a lot of us that we desire so much, this connection to each other. And for me, I desire nothing but authentic connection. And so I go around, I see patients all day long. I'm going to go see 9 patients today. And I just sit down there with them. And what I believe my patients do so much better, and I'm not bragging, it's because I sit down and I see you. I sit down, I take the time to listen to what you have to say, to like, you matter to me, your voice matters to me. And when we get back to solutions and tying this all together, like, that's from my heart. That's simply from my heart. My brain would be like, okay, your wound is this size and it need to put this treatment on it, and the wound vac has to be at this level. That's what my brain is for. But then when I can like heart center that interaction, like we're just chatting while I'm changing your wound dressing, it's such a beautiful interaction that I then gain just as much, I think, as this person I'm with. And I believe that is how we can tell, like, this is a good interaction. Like, I feel good in my heart, whether it's triggered, like that's a good feeling too. It's like, oh, there's some valuable information here. Or if you're feeling that too. And so then we leave that space in a different vibration. And I like what you said too. It's like, it's not a higher vibration. It's like that we love, this brain loves to like compartmentalize and put things on a timeline. And it's like, okay, here's my stack, here's my pyramid, and my goal is to get to the top. And once I'm there, I win. You know, that's the ego, that's the brain. But in reality, it's like, it's just this moment in all its glory.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really is. To me, like, I want to live in higher vibration because it just feels so great. So I think that's I mean, that's what I want more of. I also see higher consciousness as a tendency to be like, you know, like some kind of like plateau, or I'm above you now, or there's some now hierarchy. That's the bypass to me. Because it also, I mean, what I want to maybe bring in is some of the last commentary we'll probably have today. It's been going awesome, super fun. But I would say is like, it's these times where we feel like we've arrived somewhere. Like I'm awake now. Like that to me is a moment where it's like, okay, you're kind of missing it, because to me, like, awakening is at every moment. So as long as you're alive, like you still like you're still awakening. You know, we're just in this constant journey of like. So to me, like the most tangible, like solution based like things, I like how you're pointing to like, what are the solutions here, and how do we actually get into like something tangible here, is bringing that quality into the experience. I mean, I just went in to go have a burrito salad thing bowl, and you know, the guys were like, well, how's it going today? Like, good to see you in here. And I was like, well, it's going pretty good. Like, how are y'all? And then I walked down the line and they're like, well, have a great day. And I was like, do you get paid to say that? And they're like, definitely not. And I just, you know, I was like, well, it's this thing that is the difference of everything, isn't it? And both, like, the two people that were there, like, perked their ears and their eyes and just smiled at me, and we were all just like looking at each other, and we had kind of like hands up in our ears, like, yes, this is it, you know. We're just kind of looking at each other, and it's like, that's the thing that I think that we need, is like these moments where like it could be the difference of like me just kind of going through the line and like, well, I don't know these people or whoever they are, and just kind of separating myself further. Like, how do I actually connect more to each and everybody? And might I have some unexpected experience